will deliver a keynote speech. He will also exchange views with Central Asian leaders on the achievements of the China Central Asia mechanism, mutually beneficial cooperation within the framework, and also international and also regional issues.
That's absolutely right, Dongning. This summit comes 2 years after the first one was held in the northwestern Chinese city of Xi'an. To discuss this significant event, we're now joined in the studio by Wang Xinsong, Associate Professor at the School of Government at Beijing Normal University. We also have Andy Mok, Senior Research Fellow at the Center for China and Globalization. Gentlemen, thank you so much for coming.
But before all that, let's cross over to our reporter at the airport in Astana to see what's going on there. Hello there, Ziyuan. So what's the atmosphere there as President Xi Jinping's plane is about to land very soon?
Well, you don't hear any noise nor the band is behind me, but you can see the blue carpet is already rolled out, which means Chinese President Xi Jinping will be landing very shortly in Astana. While the first summit was held in Xi'an and this time is in Astana, this is the first time such summit, as you mentioned previously, is being held in a Central Asia countries. What we're seeing on the ground is that the crowds are gathering, the flags are already up. The blue carpet is representing the pure sky and also prosperity. And through this summit, the leaders, we talked to the Chinese ambassador to Kazakhstan, Han Chunling. He said that they look forward to this year's summit to bring out more solid outcomes and also more cooperation documents will be signed here. So we are expecting to see more cooperation in trade, education, also culture-to-culture exchanges. We're expecting the president to arrive very soon. And according to the ambassador, this is his sixth time, President Xi's sixth time being in the country. And it's within the 1 year window that he has arrived here again in Astana. Previously, it was in last year's July for the Shanghai Cooperation Organization meeting. So the country is welcoming President Xi, and we know that the band of the National Guard will be performing here as a little ceremony will be held at the airport. And that's all I have for now. Back to the studio, Dongning.
All right, thank you very much. Chen Ziyuan reporting from the international airport in Astana. And experts from Central Asian nations said the upcoming summit will boost regional cooperation and help build a closer China-Central Asia community with a shared future.
President Xi Jinping's attendance at the second China-Central Asia summit is a major event not just for Kazakhstan, but for the entire region. It reflects the deepening China-Kazakhstan relationship and broad common ground between China and the 5 Central Asian countries, spanning agriculture, water management, digitalization, and innovation. The summit is expected to guide future cooperation to a higher level.
The China-Central Asia mechanism has become a key platform for dialogue. Since the first summit, China-Kyrgyzstan trade has grown closer, with more active Chinese investment projects and joint efforts to build logistic chains, including the China-Kyrgyzstan-Uzbekistan Railway. China's openness has created more export opportunities. We're fortunate to have such a neighbor.
In his keynote speech at the first China-Central Asia Summit, Chinese President Xi Jinping called for upholding mutual support, joint development, universal security, and everlasting friendship. Over the past 2 years, cooperation between China and the Central Asian countries has made substantial progress in these areas. All Central Asian countries have aligned their national development plans or strategies with the Belt and Road Initiative, resulting in fruitful outcomes. President Xi's attendance at the second summit is of great significance.
And our correspondent Alyosha Milenkovic is also monitoring things for us in the city center of Astana. Let's get an update from Alyosha. Alyosha, what can we expect from this year's summit?
Yes, Jongshe. There are huge expectations, to be honest, about this summit. I had privilege to speak with a couple of ministers, deputy ministers here from various countries from Central Asia. Maybe half an hour ago, I spoke with Deputy Economy Minister of Uzbekistan. We talked about their expectations from this summit, and they said we expect to have more connections, more transport links, more green energy deals, and that's what, for instance, Uzbekistan will try to achieve at this summit. I spoke also with a couple of ministers from Kazakhstan government here, local government, and they also told us that they are happy that Kazakhstan is becoming #1 trade partner for China in this region. And all of them are in unison saying that they are facing a golden age for Central Asia. Let's not forget that maybe just a couple of 100 years ago, this area, this region was a very important, if not the key transport corridor between China and Europe. Now, these countries are regaining that very important transit corridor status. But that's not only about the transit corridors. That's also about development of their own societies, of their own countries, and they are looking to have more Chinese expertise, more Chinese know-how about how to develop their own countries, their own societies. They would like to invest more in green energy deals. This is something that it is very frequently mentioned here. They want to invest more in the artificial intelligence, in the e-governance, all of those things that are very developed, we can say that, in China, and they would like to have more of that from China. We are also seeing, and these people here also are saying, that economic status of all those countries is being significantly improved in the past few years, and they're expecting that will continue to grow because they have a lot of energy reserves here, hydro energy, they have a lot of uranium, they have a lot of rare earth metals, and also so many other ores, and they would like to sell those to the world, and not just to sell those to the world, but also to exploit them and use them on their own. So there are a lot of expectations from this meeting. At the table there will be over 24 agreements, just for instance between Kazakhstan and China, and many more between China and other countries.
Alyosha, I'm sure the leaders will spend time taking stock of what has been achieved in the last 2 years since the summit in Xi'an. Alyosha Milenkovic live in Astana for us this hour. Thank you so much. And earlier, I talked to former Prime Minister of Kyrgyzstan, Jumart Atarbayev, on his expectations for the upcoming China Central Asia Summit.
The second summit will be taking place in Kazakhstan. And what is important, that it's not only discussions or exchange of opinion. All those summits have a goal to establish a very practical action plan on what each one have to do in order to strengthen cooperation. And we expect the similar good results of summit in Kazakhstan from second summit. Every year, the trade, investments, all other parameters between our countries increasing. Last year was another year of record trade, reached $94.8 billion and growing very quickly. Already in 5 months of this year, trade increasing again. We have a lot of investments between our countries. We have a lot of transport connectivity projects, as well as energy cooperation, including traditional hydrocarbon trade, as well as green trade, green investments. We have humanitarian cooperation between our countries. So there is a really great potential to move forward, even with a higher speed.
It's hard to miss that Central Asian countries today are gradually strengthening coordination mechanisms and collective action capabilities. How do you view the transition of the 5 Central Asian states from more basic consultations to the joint, and the emphasis here being the joint construction of institutionalized platforms, and how can they better work with their global partners?
We are in Central Asia, from one hand side, are in a big geographical area comparison with the area of Europe. At the same time, the population of Central Asia, though it's growing very quickly, is only 82 million people. So we have to be modest in terms of our economic power. And of course, we have not to be 5 different entities, but we must make regional cooperation to demonstrate to outside world and to our own population that we are united economic region. So that is happening, and every year we have more and more integration, more and more discussion mechanism on how to get closer to each other and present ourselves with one face to other places in the world, including China. So we have our internal mechanism of consultations, but we also have so many different formats in the format of 5+1, where 5 we are Central Asian countries and 1 some other big powers around the world. And this discussion platforms existing for many, many countries around the world, from east to west, from north to south, including China. And we expect a meeting in the format 5+1 with China leadership in the city of Astana in Kazakhstan. And we expect a lot of good results as outcomes of this summit.
Right now, for some insight, let's go to our guests today, Professor Wang Xinsong and Mr. Andy Mok. I'll start with you, Professor. Well, some observers actually describe China-Central Asia relations as, this mechanism as young and promising, and also regarded as a very new, effective way of multi-cooperation in Eurasia. So how do you see this mechanism? What are its unique advantages?
Right, I think you're right in pointing out that this is a young mechanism, but at the same time, I think it is fair to say that the mechanism is also built upon a very deep foundation of relations between China and the 5 Central Asian nations. So by upgrading it to a 5+1 summit since 2023, I think we're upgrading the relations between China and the 5 Central Asian nations. And I think especially at the today's world where divisiveness, conflicts are prevalent in more and more regions, and it's very important that China builds upon more existing and upcoming mechanisms to encourage globalization and cooperation and dialogues. And this is exactly what's happening today and tomorrow in Astana, where Chinese leader and the Central Asian leader is going to have a lot of talks about our existing relations, which are built upon economic cooperation in many sectors, including energy, now green energy, and agriculture and scientific and technology development. But we would also be talking about upgrading such relationships to benefit even further on both sides.
Andy, connectivity really is the key word here in the region, whether you're talking about enhancing transportation links across Central Asia or pooling the energy reserves to benefit the greater community. It all comes down to connectivity. What are your expectations for what's going to happen with this summit?
No, that's absolutely right, Zhongshi. I think connectivity really is the key word here, because if we look at these 5 countries just in absolute terms, it's about 80 million people, it's about 500 billion in GDP. Not that significant on an absolute scale. But when we think about it from a connectivity perspective, this is the fastest, most direct land bridge between China and Europe. So what this means is that Chinese enterprises, actually any business, can reduce the time it takes by ocean, which is about 30 days, to about 12 days by rail. So this has enormous business implications because this shortens your cash-to-cash cycle. So the less time a business's money is tied up in inventory in transit, the more quickly they can turn over their cash cycle, which is very, very important for almost every business. The other reason I think connectivity is very important here is that this also, because this is a region that historically has been very challenging geopolitically, that the ability to create a stable platform for peaceful development is vital. That facilitates not only trade and investment, the movement of people as well. And then finally, to add to Professor Wang's point, I think very important here is that China's concept of standards, not soldiers, meaning its mode for interacting with countries around the world, is not military first, but it's peaceful development through first setting standards so people can develop together. respecting their individual development choices and political systems, but providing the infrastructure, whether that's the physical infrastructure of the Belt and Road, the rails, ports, etc., to the digital infrastructure that is becoming increasingly important. I think it demonstrates China's win-win model, again, of standards, not soldiers.
I like that, standards but not soldiers. So thank you very much, and we'll be getting back to you, gentlemen, for more discussion. Let's check in now with our reporter Juju, who is in Astana. Juju, hello there. What do you have for us?
Thank you. We are now right here in Astana, the capital city of Kazakhstan. Chinese President Xi Jinping is attending the second China Central Asia Summit right here in Astana. And this morning we see there's banner says that warmly welcome Chinese President Xi Jinping and long live the friendship between China and Kazakhstan. You can see there are also national flags waving behind me, both Chinese and Kazakh, highlighting the strong friendship between China and Kazakhstan. Well, Kazakhstan was the place where China's Belt and Road Initiative was first proposed, and it also remains one of China's most important partners for its westward cooperation. Last year, trade between the two countries surged over 6.8% year on year, and this figure accounts for nearly half of China's total trade with all those five Central Asian countries. And this is the first time that the summit is being held outside China in a Central Asian country. And both China and five other Central Asian countries agreed that they will establish a so-called China Central Asia cooperation mechanism. Those discussions will focus on how they can grow their partnerships together, how they can work closely and better in the future, and how to tackle those key international and regional issues. And President Xi Jinping will also hold one-on-one meetings with those leaders from those Central Asian countries. And they all agree that after this meeting, there may be even more sister city relationships. So far, there's already over 80 sister province and sister city relationships being established in Central Asia region. So with the growing number of these sister city relationships, it is easier to expand more cooperation, not only for economic, cultural, and also people-to-people exchanges. Let's look forward to more of their meetings in the coming days. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Juju, reporting from Astana.
And China continues to strengthen its ties with countries in Central Asia. The five nations, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, and Turkmenistan, are located in the heart of the Eurasian continent. They serve as key nodes in the Belt and Road Initiative and land bridges connecting China with Europe and the Middle East. In May 2023, the first China Central Asia Summit was held in Xi'an. Leaders of the six countries adopted the Xi'an Declaration of China Central Asia Summit, announcing the establishment of a joint community with a shared future.
Right, and China and Central Asia actually enjoys long-standing historical relations. As the camel caravans give way to freight trains, the age-old ties between China and Central Asia are entering a new era. So what began along the ancient Silk Road is now reshaped by modern diplomacy, trade, and shared development goals, strengthening a partnership rooted in history and focused on the future. Our reporter Chen Ziyuan has the story from Astana.
From the historic Silk Road to today's vibrant trade routes, the enduring friendship between China and Central Asia has fueled decades of cooperation.
Xi'an is where the Silk Road began its story. The city, once the heart of trade, culture, and philosophy, remains a vital symbol of the long-standing ties between China and Central Asia.
Over 2,000 years ago, a Chinese envoy set out on a journey that would reshape history. His name was Zhang Qian, the man who opened the gates to the west. He didn't return empty-handed. Among the precious gifts he brought back to China were the seeds of pomegranate. And over time, the pomegranate became more than food.
To the Tang people, the pomegranate motif symbolized blessings of fertility and thriving lineages. We're now looking at the glided silver pomegranate box. Its artists infused traditional Chinese botanical motifs with Western pomegranate designs, a testament to the Chinese-Western cultural exchange at that time.
Like the Silk Road itself, each seed in the pomegranate tells a story, a legacy of cultural exchanges and still blooming today.
While we see the leading forces in advancing connectivity and regional stability in Xi'an, these bonds continue to grow and a shared vision for future blossoms, just like the pomegranate trees planted by leaders of China and Central Asia.
In a powerful gesture of unity, the Chinese president and the leaders of Central Asia gathered to plant pomegranate trees. The trees are living symbols of the region's commitment to peace and prosperity.
From the bustling market of ancient times to modern roadway and highway connecting China and Central Asia, Xi'an has always been a point of connection. In the heart of Astana, we see the future of Central Asia's collaboration with China taking shape. This modern city is a testament to the transformation that the capital of Kazakhstan has undergone.
Astana is home to many cooperative projects, from energy pipelines to transportation networks, and has been the leading force in advancing connectivity and regional stability.
From the historic Silk Road of Xi'an to the modern-day innovation of Astana, China and Central Asia's friendship is like a living bridge, connecting the past, the present, and the future.
The China-Kazakhstan Hormuz Gateway, one of the largest dry ports in Central Asia, exemplifies the region's growing role in trade. Kazakhstan plays a critical role in this partnership, serving as the key transit hub in the Belt and Road Initiative. In recent years, bilateral trade has surged, reaching over $13.5 billion in the first half of 2024.
From the ancient Silk Road to today's new routes of trade, China and Central Asia's collaboration will continue to grow. And just like the pomegranate trees planted by the leaders, this partnership will continue to blossom and bear fruits for generations to come.
All right, now for some insight, let's go back to our studio guests, Andy Mock and Professor Wang Xinsong. Well, Andy, you mentioned a lot about the connectivity between China and Central Asia. It is indeed a key, instrumental key, actually, for building, especially fostering a brighter future for both sides. And as President Xi actually calling on building China-Central Asia community with a shared future. How do you think this mechanism actually serves for that goal?
Well, Dongning, I think the most important thing is the building of physical infrastructure. So if we look back at the historical Silk Road, it was really about trade and sharing not just products, but different cultures. So today, how are we doing this? Of course, we're not moving things by camel, but rail is a very, very important part of this. And I think one way that these so-called C5 countries are benefiting, so if we look at their level of economic development, Kazakhstan has the highest with about $12,000 in per capita GDP, I think to a low of something like 1,400. So there's a lot of room for economic development. So how does China facilitate this? So it's not just the market that China offers, but the infrastructure investment, especially railway infrastructure investment, delivers something like up to a 1.8x return on investment, meaning that if you invest $1 in rail infrastructure, you get back about $1.8 in economic return through logistics, related economic development. So I think this is a powerful economic force for these C5 countries. And this is one of the most important ways I think we see in a very practical sense how they're benefiting. Now, if we look at it from a little bit of a bigger picture, there's the question of these C5 countries, with the exception of Turkmenistan, are also members of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. So these countries also then serve as sort of a pilot area, or maybe you can think of it as a greenhouse, where new practical projects can be tested and tested very quickly. So if these results are successful, they can be quickly scaled to the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which of course includes Russia, India, Iran as well. So again, this gives these countries an opportunity to play a leadership vanguard role in global development. So I think it's a very exciting and important development, which is precisely why I think President Xi, of course, being a very busy person with a lot of priorities, is devoting so much time to being in Astana.
Professor Wang, it's been 2 years since the last summit, the first one in Xi'an. How would you reflect back on the past 2 years, and what tangible benefits do you think have have been achieved. I mean, Andy was talking about railway, and we know a new railway linking 3 countries has broken ground.
Yeah, I think in 2023, when there was the first summit in Xi'an, I was also sitting here doing the commentary. And by that point, the new railway was still not going too much far. But in the past 2 years, obviously, this project has made milestones after milestones, and we're talking about the construction work beginning in July of this year. So this is going to be very beneficial, not only to China, but to Kyrgyzstan and especially to Uzbekistan, which contains a lot of minerals, including gas and oil. And so we're talking about building upon the existing rail, and then to extend to more pipelines, for example. At the same time, in terms of trade, obviously in 2020, the trade volume was like $46 billion, but in 4 years of time, last year it was $95 billion, which doubles the volume from 4 years ago. But in terms of structure of the trade, previously we had a lot of trade relations built upon the minerals, rare earth elements and so on and so forth. But over the past 4 years, we have seen more trade happening in the sectors of green infrastructure, green energy, and Chinese investments have also ramped up in the areas of green investments. For example, Chinese companies like Goldwind, which is Xinjiang-based company, has invested very heavily in Kazakhstan in terms of wind energy. And by the way, all of the 5 countries in Central Asia benefit from a lot of sunshine. So solar energy is a natural resource that they can benefit from. And the Chinese companies have a lot of expertise in terms of photovoltaic manufacturing. And so many of the know-hows are being transferred through such trade and investment projects.
Right. And Andy, Professor Wang just mentioned a lot of very practical and strategic cooperation achievements between the two sides, between China and Central Asian countries, such as the China-Kazakhstan oil pipeline and also the freight trains among the two sides. So looking ahead, what major, especially under the framework of Belt and Road Initiative, what major infrastructure or transport corridor projects do you foresee happening?
Well, I think, Dongning, of course, the physical infrastructure layer is still very, very important, and there's still opportunities for further growth, so rail, trucking, I think, primarily. But if we look at the digital layer, I would say the soft infrastructure layer, so optimization, streamlining of customs processes, I think the digital yuan in particular as a settlement mechanism, of course, can bring enormous benefits. Some studies I've seen are that it can reduce transaction costs by up to 90%. So I think this is a very, very important area to focus on. And related to this, I think, is the upskilling of the local populations, because as they, through especially, and I think we'll talk about this more, like the Luban workshops, which are meant to be focused on more vocational training, that this gives people in these C5 countries the opportunity to enter the global workforce in a very, I think, accessible way. Again, at the same time, growing the economy in an economically viable way, but also in an environmentally sustainable way as well. So I think Professor Wang is absolutely right. The role that renewable energy, whether that's wind, solar, is playing in this part of the world with Chinese technology, Chinese investment as well, really is the whole package, and very much in the spirit of win-win.
I mean, we're getting some pictures from the Astana airport where we know the Chinese president will soon be landing there. He will be visiting Kazakhstan at the invitation of the Kazakh president. He'll be there to attend the second China Central Asia Summit. We do know the Chinese president will make a keynote speech, a highlight of his trip there. He'll also be meeting with leaders from all 5 Central Asian countries. And separately, We'll get all the details to you when they become available. But if you're just joining us here on CGTN, we're looking at pictures of the airport there in Astana, where the Chinese president will soon begin an official visit. Gentlemen, when I talked to the former Prime Minister of Kyrgyzstan, Prime Minister Aturbayev, one of the first things he said was that they knew they were a landlocked country and they had to find ways for them to become a land-linked country. And I guess that's a shared mentality, a shared mindset of all the players there in Central Asia. Andy, you touched upon this a little bit just now, talking about increasing connectivity, not just with China, but also with Europe, with all of the railways, with all of the increased connectivity. Can you also shed light on how better access to the European markets would mean for Central Asia as well?
Yeah, absolutely, Zhongshi. So I think as we heard, basically these 5 countries are landlocked, double landlocked, and they're relatively small populations. So they have to find a more creative way, I think, to engage with the rest of the world, not just China. So clearly, I think being a transit point is very important. So trade is not one way, right? It's not just China selling to Europe, but I think also Europe selling to China. And the opportunity for these C5 countries to perform value-added services, again, whether that's logistics, whether that's financial, whether that's also other types of indigenous manufacturing, I think is very important. We shouldn't overlook the Middle East as well. So Iran is a very big, important country now currently, in a very difficult situation, but the potential is of course there. We also need to look at Afghanistan, again, in recent history, a very difficult place, but again, rich with opportunity, young population, also enormous natural resource potential. So I think, again, the opportunity for these countries to work, as we heard, in a group, and I think this is, again, why China is approaching this as a mini-lateral approach. So it's not on a bilateral basis, which of course it could choose to do, but to say it's more effective to engage with them as, again, this grouping of countries in this mini-lateral format, I think, which is very conducive to long-term global growth.
Again, the Chinese president's playing it slowly taxiing to a stop there at the airport in Astana. We can see people converging there on the tarmac, the military band marching, getting into position, ready to welcome the Chinese president. This is rather familiar territory for the Chinese president because he was just there last year in July.
Yes, and I think we're going to see a scene brimming with warmth and symbolism, underscoring the special bond between the two nations. In fact, President Xi once remarked on the significance of this bond. I chose Kazakhstan. This highlights the high level and also unique nature of China-Kazakhstan relations and reflects our deep friendship. And these words, I think, echo today as the Kazakh capital rolls out a grand welcome, affirming that this relationship is like no other. And this visit we're expecting to follow, and also the summit, carry the weight of history. Kazakhstan was the place where President Xi actually proposed the Silk Road economic belt in 2013, planting the seed for this initiative that has since linked China even closer with Central Asia. And this mechanism between China and Central Asia, although it's very young, as we just discussed, young yet promising, serves as the main channel for China's engagement in the region in Central Asia. And over the past 3 decades, China and Kazakhstan have built their ties from the ground up, weathering changes in the international landscape. And in 2022, the two countries celebrated the golden 30th anniversary of their diplomatic relations, 3 decades cooperation marked by trust and also mutual respect. And notably, President Xi's very first trip abroad after the pandemic was to Kazakhstan, a choice that highlighted how much he values the partnership. And from launching major infrastructure projects to increasing trade year by year, the two neighbors have developed what they call a permanent, comprehensive strategic partnership, underscoring both permanence and also depth of bilateral relations. And each milestone, every new way, every energy project or cultural exchange was just mentioned, is rooted in the history of understanding and support they have shared since 1992. And you are seeing live pictures from the international airport in Astana, where President Xi's plane is going to land shortly, and he's going to attend the Central Asian Summit, China Central Asia Summit, during his trip.
Yeah, a little bit more about the purpose of the president's trip this time. We do know the summit is a high-level gathering held by China and 5 Central Asian countries, namely Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, and Uzbekistan. It is a significant milestone marking the development of relations between China and Central Asian countries. The Chinese Foreign Ministry said the China-Central Asia mechanism reflects the region's common desire to maintain stability and pursue high-quality development. The first China-Central Asia Summit was held in China's Xi'an in 2023. Under this mechanism, cooperation between China and Central Asia has been deepened and solidified.
And about the China Central Asia Summit, we're going to give you a bit of background information about that, because President Xi is going to make a keynote speech on that occasion. This summit is a high-level gathering held by China and 5 Central Asian countries: Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, and Uzbekistan. It is a significant milestone marking the development of relations between China and Central Asian countries. And the Chinese Foreign Ministry said the China Central Asia mechanism reflects the region's common desire to maintain stability and pursue high-quality development. The first China Central Asia Summit was held in China's Xi'an in 2023. And under this mechanism, cooperation between China and Central Asian countries has been deepened and solidified. So, Professor Wang, this mechanism is, although young, but it is regarded as an effective mechanism. How do you compare it with other existing mechanisms like SCO, Shanghai Cooperation Organization?
Right, and obviously Shanghai Cooperation Organization was founded earlier, and at the same time it is a much bigger organization. It has grown tremendously over the past years, and its agenda also is much broader, to include not only economic cooperation, but more specifically on security concerns, and that's how it was built upon in the very beginning. So in contrast, I think the China Central Asia Summit is a much more focused mechanism, both in terms of specific countries, but also in terms of the agenda. And the Central Asian countries individually, like what Mr. Mark just mentioned, are quite small in terms of population and geographic coverage, except for Kazakhstan, which is a very large country in terms of geography. But individually, they're small, and so I think the 5 countries are rather wanting to collaborate with each other to form a sort of like political entities that can cooperate with external powers, including China, Russia, and so on and so forth. And speaking of that, actually, the Central Asia China Summit is not the only C5+1 summit we're talking about here. There are also such summits between the United States and Central Asia, and recently Europe just had a C5+1 summit in April, and Indian government recently held a foreign minister level gathering with 5 Central Asian countries as well. And Korea recently launched the Silk Road initiative. So you see such initiatives, mechanisms are blooming actually around Central Asia, and which again speaks about the importance of the countries over here, and they're obviously strategically important in terms of their geography, but also they hold a lot of economic potential because of the minerals and rare earth and natural gas and oil they're holding, but also based upon that, I think these countries have a lot of potential to develop upgraded manufacturing. So speaking of mineral ore exports to China and other countries, I think there is a huge potential for these countries to upgrade their manufacturing industry to process those minerals. Of course, they need the know-how and they need the technology. And on that regard, I think China has a lot of potential to help the Central Asian countries with technology so that we're truly talking about win-win cooperation where both China and the countries in Central Asia can benefit from such relationships.
You're looking at live pictures coming out of the airport there in Astana, Kazakhstan. The Chinese president's plane has arrived and a welcome ceremony will be held there at the airport in his honor. The military band has got into position, a blue carpet rolled out in honor of the visiting Chinese president. We should be able to see the Chinese president momentarily. Make sure you do stay with us right here on CGTN. I mean, the president was just in Kazakhstan less than a year ago in July 2024, where he was there for a meeting of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. This is his 6th visit to Kazakhstan. And last year at the airport, President Tokayev, there you see it, the Chinese president stepping out of the plane that landed in Astana moments ago. He is in Kazakhstan to attend the 2nd edition of the China Central Asia Summit, where he will be making a keynote speech. He will also meet with leaders from the 5 Central Asian countries.
Right, and this visit actually happens in a very, very clear June day where sun really shines good in the city in Astana. So, Andy, how do you see the achievements that we're going to expect from this state visit and also from the summit that is followed?
Well, Dongning, I think one way to look at the expectations for achievements of this edition is we have to step back and recognize that what China is really good at, besides many things that we talk about, is institution building, and in particular, systemic institution building. So we look at the Shanghai Cooperation Organization with 10 countries. Very important because this is a very powerful source of political legitimacy and political symbolism. And it is complemented by this C+C5, which again, as we talked about, is designed really for practical, more rapid achievements. Again, whether this is in logistics, whether this is in new energy, et cetera, people-to-people relations, et cetera. So I think some things we can look for from the event level are specific tangible outcomes. So I think we heard there's expected to be something like 20-something agreements signed. And there's no surprise there. But I think what's very important to see is that the role this plays in the larger initiatives China's taking to create a more peaceful world, in that this, again, feeds into the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which, because it's so many countries with divergent interests, moves much more slowly. And the C5 can produce tangible results that then can be adopted, standardized across SCO and eventually globally. So I think, to me, this is what I'm paying attention to as much as the tangible result, but watching how, again, this is unfolding at a broader systemic level and the complementary nature of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization with the C+C5 framework.
Professor Wang, we often talk about Central Asia as a whole, as a grouping, but these are 5 distinct individual countries that differ in population, in their economic capacity, in per capita GDP, and in their desire in better relations with China, better access to the European market. Can you maybe shed light on a little bit of the differences among the 5 Central Asian countries?
Sure. I think, like you just said, I think the 5 countries differ from each other as well as they share a lot of similarities. And For example, Kazakhstan obviously is the largest out of the five, both in terms of geography and population. And for that reason, I think the bilateral trade between China and 5 countries in Central Asia is tilted toward Kazakhstan. At the same time, China, through Kazakhstan, has more logistic arrangements in terms of railway and oil and gas pipelines to Russia, to Turkmenistan, and then to Europe. I think for that reason, China is trying to balance their relationships with the 5 countries so that the other countries can also benefit from the Chinese economic magnet. That's why I think the CKL, the China, Kyrgyzstan, and the Uzbekistan railway is being launched sooner than we'd expected, because I think that railway is going to benefit a lot for the people in Kyrgyzstan and Uzbekistan who now have to trade with China through the route of Kazakhstan. So with that railway, that certainly shortens the distance and makes transportation a lot easier. At the same time, if we extend that railway from Uzbekistan further to Turkmenistan and Iran to Turkey, then we're also shortening the route between China and Europe, and also bypassing or providing an alternative pathway to Europe from the existing ones through Kazakhstan and Russia, right? So overall, I think the point is made that the 5 countries are different. However, each has its own advantages, and Kazakhstan has a lot of coal, has a lot of uranium, has a lot of lithium, a lot of oil and gas, as well as Turkmenistan and Uzbekistan. Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan, in contrast, do not have so much natural minerals, but they feature a lot of hydropower capacity. That's a very good advantage in generating power. But at the same time, the 5 countries may have some issues with sharing because they share river resources. So building dams and hydropower stations can be a problem as well. So that needs some external coordination. I think China comes into the play with a very important role to help smooth out the relations as well.
Okay, gentlemen, we'll be getting back to you for more discussion into all of this. Now, Chinese ambassador to Kazakhstan, Han Junlin, says the C5+1 mechanism has quickly gained momentum, delivering concrete outcomes and establishing a solid framework for long-term China-Central Asia collaboration.
China's C5+1 mechanism has delivered more tangible results. Although it started later than others, it has moved quickly and achieved solid progress. Early gains include the establishment of a China-Central Asia cooperation framework with 13 ministerial-level mechanisms. There is a regular summit between heads of state, ministerial meetings, and a secretariat, which began operating in April. These mechanisms and dialogue channels lay a strong foundation for deeper cooperation.
All right, let's get back to our studio guest. Well, Andy, Professor Wang just mentioned the resources that the 5 countries, inland continental countries, have. They have indeed very abundant natural resources, and they have young population, very energetic countries, and also very unique geographic advantages. So this is actually considered to have a very immense development potential. In your opinion, which economic sectors in particular reflect that potential?
Well, Dongning, I think the most direct one would be anything related to trade. So again, if we go back to expanding the physical transport infrastructure, railways, say, we can see growth opportunities, employment creation opportunities, higher value job creation opportunities as well. So I think this is a very important area. If we look at the exploitation of natural resources, whether that's uranium, whether that's natural gas, which I believe Turkmenistan is the 4th largest natural gas producer, at least reserves in the world. tremendous opportunities there as well. Again, from infrastructure, from investment to marketing and distribution. So I think there's a lot of opportunities. I think we shouldn't overlook tourism as well. So again, especially when we look at the Chinese tourist, who is more and more knowledgeable, more and more sophisticated, and more interested in independent travel outside of the I guess the traditional tourism mainstays of, say, Western Europe and North America. So I think these are very exciting growth areas. Again, trade-related logistics, natural resource exploitation, and
But this
tourism.
needs proper arrangements or management of those resources to align with their economic goals. How do you think this mechanism, China Central Asia C5+1 mechanism, actually can make those resources tapping into achieving their economic goals?
Well, I think one part of this, of course, is domestic governance capacity, right, which, of course, is dependent on each particular country and its own policy choices. But I think one of the positives of these C5 countries is not only the proximity to China, but I think a very pragmatic, non-ideological approach. So if I think about some of the cultural commonalities I think that China and this part of the world has, I think one of it is pragmatism. And here a willingness to learn from what works. And again, if we look at the so-called Chinese economic miracle over the last few decades, of course, it relies a lot on the enormous population of China, the creativity of its entrepreneurs. But I think policy decisions and policy implementation is very, very important as well. And of course, here, I think this is, again, part of the soft infrastructure that
So you think this mechanism
providing.
can align different policies from different 5 countries together?
Well, in this way, I differ perhaps a little bit with Professor Wang in that, of course, these 5 countries are different. But I think they share more similarities than differences. Again, the terrain, the geopolitical location as the crossroads, and again, in this Mackinder kind of the Eurasian landmass is the, the heart of the world. They all are very similar in this way. So I think that there really are a lot of opportunities, and again, the contemporary history as well with the former Soviet Union, I think also gives them valuable perspective, valuable lessons, both positive and negative. And of course, we see this with China as well, the ability to learn from the past, take what works, but also modify, improve on things that can be improved. And again, I think this is one of the very important complementarities that we see between these countries and China.
Professor Wang, obviously all the countries will take opportunity of this second summit to expand their cooperation. Previously, we've seen cooperation focus on areas such as transportation, infrastructure, renewable energy. Now that they're expanding, what other areas will they be most interested in?
Well, both traditional and non-traditional. I think traditional sectors such as agriculture can be important areas where both sides are going to have a lot of discussion about. For example, there has already been many agricultural cooperation which brings in modern technology. For example, the protein food structure in Central Asian countries is changing, where they used to take in a lot of dairy products, but now they're also looking forward to new protein sources, including from fish and other seafood products. And so the Chinese companies in Shandong province, for example, are exporting technologies to Kazakhstan in producing salmon and yellow cloaker and fish, ocean fish like that cannot be produced in freshwater. And so that helps a lot with the expansion of the protein food structure in Kazakhstan and other Central Asian countries. But at the same time, I think green infrastructure is going to be a very important sector, because I think all of the Central Asian countries are looking forward to diversify their economic structure instead of relying so much just on natural resources. They also like to take advantage of their solar energy, their hydropower energy, and also the wind energy to develop more renewable energy structure and based on which they can develop a more diversified economic structure. At the same time, I think high technologies are also going to be on the table. And if you think about the artificial intelligence development in the recent years, I think China obviously has been a leading country in that regard. But this can certainly benefit the Central Asian countries as well. If you think about UAE and Saudi Arabia, which are countries on the desert, they're developing very fastly on AI. I think currently UAE is investing very heavily in Kazakhstan in terms of smart city projects, and I think China can certainly add upon to that.
All right, gentlemen, appreciate your expertise and your insight. Thank you so much for staying with us this hour. And I believe that wraps up our coverage for now. CGTN will keep you posted on the second China Central Asia Summit. Make sure you do stay with us.
Right, and we're going to follow up on more information about President Xi's visit to Kazakhstan, also the China Central Asia Summit he's going to attend. I'm Li Dongning in Beijing.
I'm Zhong Shi. Bye for now.